Amid the skyscrapers of Chicago, a successful businessman accidentally took the wrong turn and brought his daughter to a small public school. That seemingly trivial mistake opened the door to an encounter that would change his life forever. There, an unassuming yet strong-willed teacher taught him and his daughter as well a lesson about love, faith, and the courage to face social prejudice. This is not a fairy tale, but the real journey of people carrying wounds, choosing to stay by each other's side, and building a new family together. Ethan Caldwell stood before the mirror in the vast bathroom of his 42nd floor apartment at Lakeview Towers, adjusting his tie for the third time, still unsatisfied. In the glass, he saw a gaunt face, dark circles pressed deep under his eyes, brown hair slightly tousled despite the gel. 35 years old, CEO of a Chicago tech company, hailed by the press as a startup genius, yet in his own eyes, at that moment, he saw only a weary man struggling to hold together a company on the verge of a critical merger, while also trying to fulfill the role of a single father. Quick, light footsteps pattered across the polished hardwood floor. "Daddy, I'm ready." Lila's clear little voice rang out. She appeared in the doorway in her brand-new uniform, crisp white shirt, navy-pleated skirt, white socks, shiny black shoes. In her hair, the rose headband she had insisted on this morning, after a round of whining that Ethan had soothed with promises and a half-cooked pancake. He smiled, his tense shoulders easing. "My girl looks so beautiful today." Lila tilted her face up, golden hair shimmering under the light. Her green eyes, the ones Grace had left behind, shone with pride. "But Daddy, you're still more handsome. You look like the men on TV." Ethan laughed, kneeling to fix her collar. "No way. I'll never be as beautiful as my princess." His hand trembled not from coffee, but from the weight of the day. Lila's first day at her new school, Riverside Academy, the place he had chosen with all his faith that he was giving her the best possible start. He knew Grace, if she were still alive, would have wanted it too. They stepped out of the apartment. The elegant hallway was carpeted in cream, with the glass windows open to a view of the deep blue Lake Michigan. The elevator carried father and daughter down to the marble-floored lobby, where uniformed guards greeted them. Ethan ignored the constant buzz of his phone in his pocket, certainly his assistant reminding him of meetings. Today, he told himself, was for Lila only. The sleek black Mercedes rolled out of the garage. Ethan entered Riverside Academy's address into the GPS, but his mind kept slipping back to the waiting reports, numbers, lawyers, and the board's echoing voices. He mechanically glided through green and red lights, fighting the urge to check his phone. In the back seat, Lila clutched her unicorn backpack tight, her eyes a mix of excitement and nervousness. "Are you feeling nervous, Lila?" Ethan asked at a stoplight. She shook her head firmly, but her tiny fingers gripped the straps until her knuckles whitened. "No. But Daddy, you'll pick me up on time, right?" The question tightened Ethan's chest. He thought of the unread documents and the meeting scheduled to drag on until 6, but he refused to waver. "I promise. At 3 o'clock, I'll be there, no matter what." Suddenly, the GPS directed him down a narrow street shaded with golden maples. Ethan frowned. It was unfamiliar. He followed anyway, until the car stopped before a red brick building, a playground with brightly painted slides, and on the door, a hand-painted sign, Maplewood Elementary School. He froze. This wasn't Riverside Academy with ivy walls and iron gates. But Lila squealed. "Daddy, look, a slide and a rainbow on the door. So fun." The clock read 7:45. If he turned back now, he would be late for his meeting. But if he left her here, just for one day, what difference would it make? He hesitated, then softened at Lila's glowing face. "All right, Princess. Let's try this school today." The rainbow-painted wooden door opened, and children's laughter spilled through the halls. Crayon drawings lined the walls, the air smelling of apples and tempera paint. Warmth and noise filled the space, utterly unlike the hushed elegance he had pictured at Riverside. Ethan barely had time to take it in before his eyes landed on a scene that stopped the world. In the hallway, a woman knelt, cradling a crying boy. Her voice was soft, each word gentle like a lullaby. Her brown skin glowed under the window light, her natural curls falling against her cheek. When she looked up, her warm brown eyes met his. Ethan couldn't breathe. Since Grace's death, he hadn't felt such a stirring. "Hello, can I help you?" She stood, laying a protective hand on the children around her. Her voice was sweet, yet edged with the fatigue of someone who spent her patience all day. Ethan cleared his throat awkwardly. I'm Ethan Caldwell. This is my daughter, Lila. Today's her first day." She frowned slightly, then smiled in mild surprise. "I'm sorry, but I don't have a student named Lila. You must have the wrong school. This is Maplewood Elementary. Riverside Academy is across the city." Heat flushed Ethan's face. How foolish of him. But Lila tugged at his hand, whispering, "Daddy, I like this place. I want to stay. Please?" The woman, the teacher, looked at them, then knelt to Lila's level. "If your daddy agrees, you can stay in my class today. We're finger painting. My name is Amara Johnson." Ethan wavered. He wanted to refuse, but Lila's eyes shone hopeful, and Amara's gentle smile lingered. For a fleeting moment, in the middle of all the pressure, he felt something else. Peace. "Thank you," he murmured. As he handed Amara the backpack, their fingers brushed. A spark jolted up his spine. She paused too, breath-catching. "Bye, Daddy. I love you," Lila shouted, dashing after Amara into the colorful classroom. Ethan stood still in the hallway, watching her small figure disappear among laughter, watching the woman in her simple dress. In his chest, something long dormant stirred awake. He couldn't yet name it, but he knew. His life had just turned onto a new path. Back in the Mercedes, Ethan sat briefly, hands on the wheel, engine off. He tried to focus on the coming meeting, on the multi-million-dollar contract, but his mind kept returning to Amara's brown eyes, her gentle smile as she spoke to Lila. The image caught in his chest, like memories of Grace once did, but unlike grief. This feeling was warm, fragile, alive. He started the car, merging into Chicago's morning traffic. The city throbbed like a giant machine. Horns, trains, men in suits clutching briefcases, women in heels hurrying. For years, Ethan had been just another cog, shuttling from boardroom to boardroom, living on packed schedules. But this morning, walking out of Maplewood Elementary, he felt as if he had left behind a piece of his heart in that laughter-filled hallway. The meeting convened in a glass-walled room high in Caldwell Tech's tower. Lawyers, shareholders, and partners sat around the long table, eyes fixed on Ethan. They expected the decisive man who could spin every deal into gold. But today, his mind wandered. Every time he spoke, an image intruded Lila with paint-stained hands, grinning, perhaps humming to the class. Was she happy in that colorful room? And Amara, the teacher with the honeyed voice, was she nearby, guiding her patiently? A colleague nudged him discreetly. Ethan, startled, forced out instructions in his hoarse, sleep-starved voice. Yet the thought grew clearer. What did any report, any contract, truly mean if he couldn't give Lila a whole, joyful childhood? After the meeting, he retreated to his private office. On his desk sat a framed photo of Grace. Her smile was as gentle as ever, but her eyes seemed to ask, "Are you keeping your promise?" The promise that even if she were gone, he would let Lila grow up surrounded by love, never starved of it. Ethan swallowed hard, realizing he had filled the void with work and wealth, but love he had never known how to give. The phone buzzed. His assistant Melissa reported, "Mr. Caldwell," Maplewood called. "The teacher wanted to remind you Lila must be picked up on time at 3 p.m. Ethan froze. He had never listed Maplewood in the records. How did they know to call? Then he remembered. Before he left, Amara had asked for his number, just in case. Such a small gesture, yet warmth spread in his chest. At 2:45 sharp, Ethan left the office, ignoring his employees' startled looks. He drove through the crowded streets to Maplewood Elementary. His Rolex ticked to 3 as he stepped into the familiar hallway. Lila was the first to run out, cheeks flushed, shirt smeared with blue paint. "Daddy, I painted a huge rainbow. Miss Amara says I have talent in art." She laughed brightly, wrapping her arms around his neck. Ethan's eyes stung. It had been so long since he'd seen her this happy. Amara appeared behind her, hands still stained with paint. Lila is wonderful. She helped her friends mix colors and even sang for the class. You can be proud. Her voice was low and warm, her eyes shining with sincerity. Ethan hesitated, his reply quieter than usual. Thank you for letting her stay. I owe you a lot. Amara shook her head with a smile. There's no debt. Sometimes, everyone needs a soft place to land. Your daughter deserves that. Their eyes lingered. For a brief moment, the hallway noise faded, leaving only the quick thrum of his heart. Ethan realized his hands were trembling, just as they had when he adjusted his tie that morning. But this time, the trembling came from something he thought he had lost forever: hope. As he led Lila back to the car, Ethan glanced one last time. Amara was crouched, gathering paint boxes, calm as ever, though her eyes flickered toward him. The rainbow door closed behind them, but in Ethan's heart, it stayed open, revealing an entirely new road. He knew this morning's mistake was not a slight misstep. It was a fateful turning point, one that had drawn 3 lives together, beginning a story whose ending he dared not yet imagine. 3 days after the fateful mistake, Ethan still couldn't shake the lingering feeling. He sat in his high-rise office, staring at Chicago's crowded streets. The thick merger files were spread across his desk, yet his eyes stayed fixed on his phone where his assistant's reminders kept popping up. In his mind, instead of numbers, he kept seeing Amara leaning down to talk with Lila, her voice gentle but firm. "Daddy, why are you staring outside all the time today?" Lila's voice broke his thoughts. She was sitting in the kitchen, legs swinging under the high chair as she munched on cereal. Ethan startled, forcing a smile. "Just thinking about work, princess." "No, you're thinking about Miss Amara." Lila said it so matter-of-factly, as if it were obvious truth. Her green eyes sparkled with a sensitivity far beyond her 8 years. "You look just like when you look at Mommy's picture, but a little different. Like you miss her." Ethan froze, his coffee cup trembling slightly in his hand. It had been so long since anyone, but Grace, had touched his heart. Yet his little girl had seen straight through him with a single sentence. Grace's words from her old journal echoed in his head. Let her be loved. Don't let her grow up with only the shadow of the past. Ethan inhaled deeply. "Maybe. I think about Miss Amara because you're happy around her. Then we should thank her." Lila squealed. "I want to bring her coffee, like you bring coffee for people at work. You said coffee makes grown-ups happy." The idea made Ethan laugh at first, but the more he thought about it, the more it made sense. A thank you, a reason to see Amara again. He nodded. "All right, we'll do that. But we need to pick the kind of coffee she likes." An hour later, they stood in front of the glass doors of Harbor Brew Cafe, a small, cozy shop a few blocks from Maplewood Elementary. Noon sunlight streamed through expansive windows, casting honey gold over wooden tables. Ethan gripped the coffee cup in his hand, his heart thudding faster than it should. He had stood before hundreds of investors without flinching, yet this simple meeting unsettled him like a teenager again. Through the glass, he spotted Amara. She sat in a corner, her curls loose, a simple blue cardigan draped over her shoulders. In front of her lay a stack of student workbooks, and she chewed gently on a pen cap, her lips pressed in thought. The light highlighted her face, each line strong yet soft. Ethan's chest tightened. "There she is, Daddy," Lila exclaimed, then darted through the door, leaving Ethan unprepared. Amara looked up, surprised, then her smile bloomed. "Lila, what a surprise. Did you come to see me?" The little girl hugged her waist, chattering, "We brought you coffee. Daddy says grown-ups like it. I got hot chocolate." Ethan stepped inside, nodding in greeting. He placed the cup on the table. "Vanilla latte. I hope that's right." Amara's eyes lit up. "You guessed perfectly. Thank you." They sat together. At first, just small talk about class, about Lila's rainbow painting. But gradually, the words dug deeper. Ethan spoke of single fatherhood, sleepless nights balancing reports while worrying over fevers, mornings so rushed he couldn't even brew his coffee. Amara listened with full attention, her gaze free of judgment. "You're already doing so well. Many fathers in your position would have walked away, But you're here, every day. The praise caught in his throat. He couldn't remember the last time someone acknowledged his efforts. Then it was Amara's turn. She spoke of her broken marriage to Marcus Barnett, a wealthy man who wanted her to abandon teaching and play the honored wife role at banquets. When she refused, he found pleasures elsewhere, leaving her with a heavy divorce and a bruised pride. I swore to myself I'd never shrink small enough to fit someone's mold again. Amara sighed, a shadow passing in her eyes. Ethan studied her. Anyone who asked you to do that was a fool. You deserve to be yourself and to be loved for it. The words escaped him raw and authentic, even startling himself. A silence fell. Their eyes locked, the air charged with electricity. But then Amara blinked, pulling her hand back as it brushed his. I should finish grading these papers. Her voice was suddenly rushed. She gathered her things and stood. Thank you for the coffee. Really. But Ethan wanted to speak, to hold her there. But Amara was already slipping out the door, her small frame disappearing into the crowded sidewalk. Lila frowned. Why did Miss Amara leave so fast? Did you say something wrong, Daddy? Ethan shook his head softly, forcing calm. No, Princess. She needs time. But inside, he knew. A door had cracked open, only to slam shut again, and he couldn't stop himself from wanting to keep knocking until it opened once more. That evening, Ethan drove back to Lakeview Towers with unease gnawing at him. The sunset burned red across Lake Michigan, yet inside him was an emptiness he couldn't name. He had known loss, but Amara's sudden retreat didn't feel like loss. It felt like a warning. His heart was beginning to open, and that was terrifying. In the elevator, Lila chattered excitedly. Miss Amara's so nice. I think she's like a princess from a fairy tale, but she wears simple dresses instead of ball gowns. Daddy, can she be my stepmom? The question lodged in his throat. He ruffled her hair with a strained smile. Let's not think that far ahead, Lila. She's your teacher. But you look at her like in cartoons, like when the prince looks at the princess. Lila propped her chin on her hand, her green eyes innocent, yet sharp. Ethan stayed silent. She didn't know how true that was. He remembered first seeing Grace at the college library, that same look that had stopped his heart. But with Amara, the feeling came with fear. Fear of betraying Grace's memory, of giving Lila hope only to let her down. Fear that the harsh world outside would crush something so fragile. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He stood at the apartment window, staring at the glittering skyline. In his mind echoed Amara's words, I'll never shrink small enough to fit anyone's mold again. It wasn't just defiance of the past, but a declaration of strength. He longed to step into that world, but he also feared that his own world of lavish banquets, ruthless tycoons might suffocate her. Ethan took Lila to Riverside Academy the next morning. As planned, the private school gleamed with modern buildings, black iron gates, and manicured lawns. Parents in designer clothes parked luxury cars along the street. Lila held his hand, her face unusually solemn. At the gate, she tugged at him. Daddy, I liked the other school better. It had more colors. And Miss Amara smiled more than the teachers here. Ethan bent down, seeing disappointment in her eyes. His chest ached. I understand. But try here first, okay? This is a good school too. Lila nodded reluctantly, slipping into the building. Ethan stood at the fence, watching her small figure vanish. And then it struck him. Sometimes, what society called good wasn't the same as happiness. In the following days, Ethan buried himself in work to drown the emptiness. But whenever he had a spare moment, he drove past Maplewood Elementary. He never stopped, only glancing at the rainbow-painted doors, watching children pour out at dismissal, hoping to glimpse Amara's curls. One afternoon, stuck at a red light, he saw her. Amara walked with a group of children, a thin coat around her shoulders, workbooks cradled in her arms. She paused to tie a little girl's shoelaces, then patted her head. Her smile was radiant yet straightforward against the bustling street. Ethan couldn't help but smile too, warmth flooding his chest. But he didn't open his car door, partly out of fear of rejection, a fear of dragging Amara into his world, where every move was scrutinized, and every choice came with a price. He drove on, leaving her image in the rearview mirror, both soothing and aching. That night, Lila asked again, "Daddy, why don't we see Miss Amara anymore? She makes me feel safe." Ethan's throat tightened. Sometimes grown-ups have complicated reasons. Complicated is what grown-ups say when they're too scared to do what they want. Lila's reply was firm enough to stun him. He stared at his daughter, realizing that in her young eyes was a clarity adults often lost, and in his chest a quiet resolve flickered. He wouldn't let fear hold him forever, because perhaps the chance for love for him and for Lila was right before him, waiting only for his courage to step forward. While Ethan was buried in merger documents one weekend afternoon, his desk phone rang. Melissa's voice was unusually urgent. "Mr. Caldwell, Maplewood Elementary just called. Lila has a high fever. I tried reaching Mrs. Ramirez, but she's in Portland visiting her sister and can't return immediately." In that instant, all contracts, numbers, and plans vanished from Ethan's mind. All he saw was his little girl curled up in the school infirmary. He shot to his feet, tossing his pen aside. "I'm on my way." Chicago at noon was choked with traffic, but Ethan wove through the lanes like a desperate man. With every passing minute, his heart pounded harder, haunted by visions. Lila struggling to breathe, Lila convulsing, Lila calling for him and him not being there. He cursed himself for insisting she go to school that morning despite her feeling unwell. When he arrived at Maplewood, the halls were hushed. In the small infirmary, Lila lay on a cot, face flushed, hair damp with sweat. The school nurse had just checked the thermometer, 103 degrees Fahrenheit. "She needs close monitoring." Ethan knelt, clutching her burning hand. "Daddy's here, princess." "I'm so sorry." Lila's eyes fluttered open, her voice weak. "I want Miss Amara." Ethan froze. That name from his daughter's fevered lips was proof enough. Amara had become a safe anchor for Lila in just a few short weeks. Without hesitation, Ethan pulled out his phone and found Amara's number. 2 rings. Her voice came through warm, edged with concern. "Hello? Amara, it's Ethan Caldwell. I'm sorry to bother you, but Lila has a high fever. Mrs. Ramirez is away. I don't know what to do." There was a brief silence, then her firm reply. "Where are you?" "The school infirmary. I'll be right there." Less than half an hour later, Amara arrived at Lakeview Towers. Ethan had already taken Lila home, but in the vast bedroom, he was fumbling with cold compresses, fever medicine, electrolyte packets, everything overwhelming for a man more accustomed to commanding hundreds of employees than tending to a sick child. Amara set her bag on a chair. She wasn't in a dress this time, but jeans and a plain t-shirt, her hair tied back neatly. That simplicity softened the apartment's glossy coldness. "Let me." She took the towel, dipped it in cool water, and gently laid it on Lila's forehead, every motion so natural, as if she had done it 1,000 times. Ethan stood by helplessly. "I don't know anything. When Grace was alive, she handled all of this. I just sat, signing contracts." Amara glanced at him, her eyes softening. "You're here, beside her. That's what matters most." All afternoon, Amara stayed by the bed, changing compresses, spooning in broth. Ethan sat across, watching each movement. The apartment, once filled only with marble and steel, now carried the scent of chicken soup and the quiet hum of Amara's voice as she hummed a lullaby. Warmth he thought had died with Grace seeped back into the rooms. When the fever finally eased, Amara slipped to the kitchen. Ethan followed, catching her frowning at his nearly empty fridge, only wine bottles and takeout containers. "You plan to raise her on pizza?" she teased, raising an eyebrow. Ethan flushed, running a hand through his hair. "Mrs. Ramirez usually shops. I'm not good at this part." Amara chuckled, pulling out a few onions and wilted greens. "Then today you'll learn. Grab a knife." The CEO, who once signed billion-dollar contracts, now stood chopping carrots under the instructions of an elementary school teacher. His slices came out clumsy, some thick, some paper-thin, but Amara only shook her head, never mocking. "What matters is you're trying." They cooked and talked. Ethan told her about the early startup days in a garage, sleeping on chairs, living on instant noodles. Amara shared the joy of hearing a child read their first word, or students shyly giving her candy on Valentine's Day. At one point, Ethan paused, watching her tilt her head to taste the soup, her face lighting when the flavor was right. The warm kitchen light glowed on her brown skin, and suddenly his chest tightened. "You're staring," Amara murmured without looking at him, teasing yet hesitant. Ethan laughed softly, admitting, "I can't help it." Silence fell. Only the ticking wall clock, the bubbling pot, and their racing hearts filled the air. Ethan stepped closer, brushing aside a stray curl from her forehead. She didn't move away, only drew in a sharp breath. "I haven't stopped thinking about you since the cafe," he whispered. "Maybe I'm crazy, but I've never felt more alive than when I'm with you." Amara trembled, her eyes flickering between longing and fear. "Ethan." He leaned down, and the kiss came inevitable, tentative at first, then fierce. His arms encircled her waist, her hands clutching his shirt. Time ceased, leaving only the taste of salt on their lips and the rush of heat between them. Then a weak cough came from the bedroom. They jolted apart, breathless. Amara hurried back, face flushed. I need to check on Lila." She slipped away, leaving Ethan standing in the kitchen, heart pounding wildly. He knew everything had shifted. A new door had opened, and he wasn't sure he could close it again. The apartment fell quiet, save for the hum of the air conditioner and the faint light spilling from the bedroom. Amara sat by the bed, spooning warm water to Lila's lips. The fever had broken. Her eyes were weary but clear. "Miss Amara," Lila whispered hoarsely. "Stay, please." "I dreamed of Mommy," she said. "If you're here, I'll be okay." Amara froze, her heart clenching at the child's innocent words. She stroked the damp blonde hair. "I'll stay until you're asleep. Promise." From the doorway, Ethan watched. The soft glow lit Amara's face, her tender gaze making his chest ache. He saw his daughter clutching her hand, as if it were an anchor, and he realized Amara wasn't just a teacher who had stumbled into their lives. She was the missing piece needed by both father and daughter. When Lila finally drifted off, Amara stepped into the living room. Ethan had prepared 2 cups of ginger tea on the glass table. The stark white walls seemed warmer now, scented with steam. "Thank you for coming," Ethan said quietly, his voice rough. "I don't know how I'd manage alone." Amara cradled the cup in both hands. "You did well. Lila knows she's loved. Children don't need perfection, they need to feel safe." Ethan shook his head, gaze heavy. "I'm afraid I'm not enough. I've buried myself in work for 3 years, avoiding everything else. Sometimes I wonder what kind of father I really am. Grace, she was always the gentle part. I only know how to provide." Amara met his eyes, her voice firm but soft. "Don't you see? Even in her fever, the first name Lila called was Daddy. She trusts you, and she called me too. Maybe she's just asking one more person to stand beside you." Her words struck deep. Ethan lifted his gaze, locking with her warm brown eyes. The vast room seemed to shrink, leaving only the two of them, the distance between fading. He wanted to reach across, take her hand from the cup, but Amara pulled away gently, setting it down. "I should go. It's late." Ethan rose too, hesitant. "I can drive you." "No need. I'll take a taxi." Her tone was steady, though her eyes wavered. They walked to the door. As she grabbed her bag, Ethan spoke, his voice low. "That kiss, I don't regret it. Do you?" Amara froze, turning toward him. Her eyes burned with conflict, longing against fear. Finally, she sighed. "Ethan, it's all too fast. I'm not sure I'm ready to trust again." He swallowed disappointment, nodding. "I understand. But Amara, I won't pretend that nothing happened. I can't." She didn't answer, only opened the door. Before stepping into the hallway, she looked back, as if to say something but stayed silent. The door closed, leaving Ethan alone in the vast apartment, with a trace of her vanilla scent lingering. He pressed his forehead to the door, shutting his eyes. His heart pounded, torn between hope and fear. But one thing was sure. For the first time in 3 years, he wanted to live fully, to break free from his cold armor. And at the center of that longing was Amara Johnson. In the bedroom, Lila stirred, murmuring in her sleep, "Miss Amara." The tiny whisper echoed through the apartment like a prophecy. From this moment on, Ethan knew nothing would ever be the same. After the night Amara left his apartment, Ethan found he couldn't return to the numb rhythm of his old routine. He tried to focus on the merger, the millions in figures staring at him from every page, but his mind kept drifting to brown eyes and the searing kiss they had shared in his kitchen. The more he thought, the more certain he became. He couldn't let go. When Amara arrived at class the next morning, a vase of pure white roses was already waiting on her desk. The children gathered around whispering, their eyes wide with curiosity. A little girl exclaimed, "Teacher, that must be from your boyfriend." Amara flushed, quickly adjusting the vase. She knew exactly who had sent it, but pretended to smile casually. Tucked inside was a card with just a few words. "Thank you for taking care of Lila. E.C." That entire day, Amara couldn't concentrate. Every glance at the flowers sent a tremor through her chest. It had been so long since anyone made her feel cherished. Yet alongside the warmth came fear. Ethan was a famous CEO, and she was just a public school teacher. The gap was too broad. She refused to twist herself into someone else's mold ever again. 2 days later, another package arrived, a hardcover copy of Where the Crawdads Sing, with a note, "You once said this was your favorite. I hope it reminds you of your dreams." Amara held the book, tears stinging her eyes. That evening, when she told her friend, Tasha, she shook her head with a bitter smile. "Can you believe it? A busy CEO remembered a book I mentioned once in passing." Tasha raised her brows. "Rich men usually send handbags or jewelry. A man who remembers details like that, he's truly listening. Don't dismiss it so quickly." Amara stayed quiet, torn. Her heart leaned forward, but fear pulled her back. That weekend, Ethan sent an unusual invitation. "Meet me at Maplewood's schoolyard at 7 p.m. If it bothers you, pretend this message never came." Amara hesitated all day, but when evening came, she went. The schoolyard had been transformed into something out of a fairy tale. Strings of fairy lights twinkled from the trees. A blanket spread across the grass. Takeout boxes from her favorite Thai restaurant, neatly arranged. In the middle, Ethan stood waiting, not in his usual suit, but in a simple grey sweater. "Sorry if this feels sudden," he said with a nervous smile, his green eyes flickering with worry. "I just wanted a place where you'd feel safe. No parties, no boardrooms, just you and me." Amara was speechless. It had been years since anyone cared so much about her comfort. She sat, accepting the food. The dinner was simple, but their conversation flowed. Ethan spoke about his childhood in the suburbs. His mother was a nurse, and his father was a truck driver. He had never dreamed of millions, only of building something useful. Amara shared her dream of opening a community learning center where underprivileged children could receive tutoring for free. Her eyes glowed with passion, and Ethan couldn't look away. When night deepened, they lay side by side on the blanket, gazing at the rare stars piercing Chicago's haze. Ethan turned toward her, his voice low. "Amara, do you know how afraid I was? Afraid I'd never feel anything again after Grace died. But then you appeared, and suddenly, I have hope." Amara's eyes glistened. "Ethan, I don't want to be anyone's replacement. No, you're not a replacement. You're you. And that's exactly why I want to move forward." Her heart surged violently, but the voice of her past rose too. "He'll leave you once the excitement fades. Men like Marcus, men like all of them, never stay." She shot upright, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Ethan, I can't. This is too fast. I need time." He rose too, grasping her hand. "I won't push you. Just don't run from this feeling. Give it a chance." She pulled free, trembling. "I'm scared, and when I'm scared, I step back. I'm sorry." Then she hurried from the schoolyard, leaving Ethan among the flickering lights, his heart heavy. He looked up at the Chicago sky, realizing the cost of opening up. Hope always walked hand in hand with despair. But deep inside, he knew there was no going back. Amara reached her small apartment late that night. She leaned against the door, her hands shaking. Ethan's words replayed in her head, "You're not a replacement, you're you." Part of her longed to believe, another part shrank in fear. Her apartment was modest, an old bookshelf, a few green plants, and children's drawings pinned to the wall. She looked around, a bitter laugh escaping. Ethan belonged to another world. Skyscrapers, galas, luxury cars. She was a public school teacher on a modest salary, often paying for supplies out of her own pocket. Could those two worlds ever meet? The next day, Tasha stopped by. Noticing the fresh white roses still bright on the table, she whistled. "He's persistent." "How long are you going to run?" Amara frowned. "Tasha, you don't understand. I can't step into his world. I can't bear the whispers." The public school teacher chasing after a millionaire. Tasha crossed her arms. "So you'll let other people decide your worth?" "Amara, you spent years healing after Marcus, but not every man is him. Don't let one cruel man define love for the rest of your life." Amara said nothing. She couldn't argue, but the unease clung like a shadow. Ethan, meanwhile, couldn't stay still. He thought endlessly of ways to approach Amara without frightening her. Every morning, after dropping Lila at Riverside Academy, he circled past Maplewood to glimpse the rainbow-painted doors. He knew he looked like a lovesick fool, but he had never been so sure of anything. Amara was the missing piece for him and Lila. One evening, he knocked on Amara's door. In his hands was not jewelry or champagne, but a container of homemade chicken soup, the recipe Amara had taught him days before. She opened the door, surprised, with her curls tied high, wearing a loose sweater. "I tried cooking what you showed me. Wanted to see if I got it right," Ethan admitted sheepishly. Amara hesitated, then let him in. The warm scent filled the small apartment, easing the tension. She tasted it, her eyes flickering with surprise. "Not bad. Maybe you learn faster than I thought." They sat at her small wooden table, eating together. The conversation drifted to simple things: her class, childhood friends, little habits. Ethan revealed he had attended public school too, and his parents were working themselves to the bone to get him through college. For the first time, Amara glimpsed a different Ethan, not the millionaire CEO, but the boy who once sat in the back row, dreaming of escaping his working-class neighborhood. The distance between them seemed to shrink. Yet just as her heart softened, the memories of Marcus surged back, the sweet words, the promises, the betrayal. She remembered how he had left her for someone more worthy. She set her spoon down, taking a deep breath. "Ethan, you need to understand. I'm not some project for you to fix. I don't want to be a pretty story for the press." Ethan looked up, steady. "Amara, I don't see you as a project. I see you as the woman who made Lila laugh again, who made me believe in tomorrow. That's not something money can buy." His words shook her. In his eyes, she saw sincerity unclouded by ambition, yet the scar of fear clung tight. After dinner, Ethan rose, handing her the empty bag. At the door, he paused. "I won't rush you, but I won't disappear either. Because what I want isn't just a moment, it's a journey." Amara stood still as the door closed. Her heart pounded wildly, half wanting to run after him and lock it away. She knew she was standing on the edge, between longing and fear, and once she crossed, there would be no turning back. That night, she sat by the window, city lights glittering outside. The copy of Where the Crawdads Sing that Ethan had given her was in her hands. She opened the first page, rereading the note in blue ink. "May it remind you of your dreams." She had buried dreams long ago of unconditional love and a home. Outside, Chicago roared on, but inside Amara, a silent storm raged. Would she let fear rule her forever, or dare to believe that sometimes a mistake could be the beginning of what was most right? One weekend night, after long, grueling days negotiating the merger, Ethan sat alone in the Lakeview Towers apartment. Lila was already asleep, her breathing steady in the pink bedroom Grace had once decorated. In the quiet, he opened a wooden box tucked away in his closet, the box he had never dared to open since his wife's death fully. Inside were Grace's keepsakes, an unfinished knitted scarf, a few family photos, and a brown leather journal worn at the edges. Ethan's fingers trembled as he touched the cover. It was the diary Grace had written in almost every night while he was stuck in late meetings, her pen scratching away as she sat on the sofa. He had never read it, thinking it too private, but tonight something urged him to open it. The first pages were filled with little notes. Lila's new words, a banana bread recipe, stories from parent-teacher meetings. But the further he read, the blurrier his vision became. In every line, he heard Grace's voice, gentle, firm, like she was still beside him. Then he froze at a page, his heart hammering. Attended the education fundraising gala tonight. Ethan was busy again, so I went alone. I met a remarkable woman there, Amara Johnson, an elementary school teacher. She spoke of her students as though they were her own children. When she described the joy of a child reading their first word, her face lit up. It felt like looking at a younger version of myself, passionate but without a safety net. For some reason, I thought, if one day I'm not here anymore, I hope Ethan and Lila meet someone like Amara, someone with a heart big enough to love them both. I don't know why I'm writing this, but the feeling is real. Ethan dropped the journal, chest tightening. Grace had met Amara. Not only met, but been struck enough to record it, as if she had glimpsed the future. He turned the pages quickly. More than once, Grace mentioned the teacher. I can't stop thinking about the woman at the gala. Something in her eyes made me believe if I couldn't raise Lila to the end, there would still be someone strong enough to do it. Tears spilled onto the pages. For 3 years, Ethan had carried guilt every time his heart stirred for Amara, convinced it was a betrayal of Grace. But now, through her words, he understood. Grace never wanted him to live in shadows. She had believed someone like Amara might come. The next morning, Ethan carried the journal to Maplewood. Amara guided the children in class as they wrote short paragraphs on My Hero. He stood at the door, watching her bend over each desk, patient and encouraging. The children's laughter filled the room. Peace washed over him. At recess, he stepped inside. Amara blinked in surprise but forced a steady smile. Ethan, I thought you'd be buried in work. He held out the journal. There's something I need to show you. Ethan set the book on the table in the cramped teacher's lounge. Grace, my wife, wrote about you, the night you met at the gala. Amara's eyes widened. I remember talking to a woman named Grace, but I had no idea. He opened to the page, sliding it toward her. Amara's hands shook as she read, tears spotting the paper. She thought of me that way. Her voice cracked. Ethan nodded, his eyes raw. For years, I thought caring for you was betraying Grace, but it turns out she wished me to find someone like you. Not a replacement, just a continuation of love for Lila. Amara covered her mouth, sobs slipping through. The walls she had built for so long wavered. She felt the strange thread of fate, first meeting Grace, then, years later, being drawn back to Ethan and Lila. Ethan reached for her hand, voice low. I don't know if you believe in destiny, but I believe Grace saw in you what Lila and I would one day need. I don't want to step back anymore, Amara. Her heart trembled, pulled between fear and longing. Before her was a man shedding his CEO armor, revealing a fragile heart, and behind him she felt Grace's presence, smiling her blessing. Amara didn't speak, but didn't let go of his hand either. A door cracked open inside her, the door to believing this love might not be a mistake. Later, she whispered, voice trembling, Ethan, do you understand how afraid I am? I've been abandoned before. I was told I wasn't enough. I swore I'd never let my heart be that vulnerable again. But reading this, it feels like your wife is handing me a responsibility I'm not sure I can bear. Ethan's gaze held hers. Amara, no one wants you to replace Grace, not even her. All she wanted was for Lila to grow up loved, and I believe only you can give her that. Amara wiped her tears, smiling bitterly. Do you know what society will say? A millionaire CEO and a public school teacher. They'll whisper, I'm a gold digger, climbing up. I've heard enough of that all my life. I know, Ethan said firmly, but I also know the only thing that matters is whether Lila is happy. And you've seen she called your name even in her fever. She's opened her heart to you in a way no one else could. And me, for the first time in 3 years, I feel alive. Silence lingered. Outside, the sound of children's laughter filtered in a reminder of why Amara had chosen teaching. Her faith that love could change lives. Maybe now, she was being asked to believe the same for her own. Finally, she nodded faintly as if to herself. I need time, Ethan. But I don't want to keep running. Hope lit his face. He reached across the table again. This time, she didn't pull away. Their joined hands formed a quiet pact, no grand promises, but something truer. In the days that followed, things shifted. Ethan often appeared at Maplewood after school not as a commanding CEO, but as a simple father picking up his child. Lila would run to him, and Amara would watch from the doorway. Their eyes would meet. One nod was enough to say everything. One afternoon, Ethan invited her and Lila for ice cream at the park nearby. The three sat on a wooden bench, Lila giggling with ice cream smeared across her face. Amara dabbed her with a napkin, her movements so natural that Ethan was struck silent. In that instant, he glimpsed a family not perfect, but whole. As Lila scampered to the slide, Ethan murmured, I read more of the journal. Grace wrote that love doesn't disappear when shared, it multiplies. That's what she wanted for us. And I think she's seeing us now. Amara turned, worry still in her eyes, but softer than before. I don't know if I'm ready, but I want to try. For Lila, and for myself. Ethan smiled a smile he hadn't felt in years, one that came not just from his lips, but from his soul. Then we'll try, Amara. One step at a time, no pressure, no rush. That night, back in her apartment, Amara pulled out a small wooden box she had kept hidden. Inside were remnants of her past, a wedding photo, the wedding ring long removed. She studied them briefly, slipped everything into a large envelope, and carried it to the donation center nearby. When she stepped back onto the street, she inhaled deeply. The air felt lighter, as if she had shed a burden. Grace's words echoed in her mind. If I'm not here one day, I hope Ethan and Lila meet someone like Amara. Amara smiled softly to herself. Grace, I'll never replace you, but I'll love them with everything I have. Overhead, Chicago's skyscrapers blinked with light, and in Amara's heart, a fragile new faith bloomed. Maybe this time, love wasn't a mistake at all, but the most right thing she could choose. In the weeks after Grace appeared in her journal, Ethan and Amara's relationship settled into a new rhythm. They no longer avoided each other, nor rushed to give what they had a name. Yet every afternoon, when Ethan came to pick up Lila, they paused to talk, sometimes only about homework, sometimes about weekend meals. Those small, ordinary moments bound them more than any gift could. Lila, ever more perceptive than her age, quickly noticed the change. One evening, as father and daughter ate spaghetti in the Lakeview Towers apartment, she asked suddenly, Daddy, will Miss Amara come to our house again? Ethan froze, trying to sound casual. Maybe. Do you want her to? Yes. I like her. She tells stories better than you and sings lullabies like Mommy. Her green eyes shimmered with hope. If she's here more, it'll feel like a real family. The words struck Ethan silent. For 3 years, he had focused on the duty of raising his child, never realizing Lila felt the absence of a real family. Now he understood. To her, Amara wasn't just a teacher, but a door to the world she longed for. One Friday afternoon, Ethan took Lila to a small soccer game in the park near the school. Unexpectedly, Amara led a group of students for after-school activities. Lila ran over, grabbed her hand, and happily pulled the two adults together. Sitting on a wooden bench, Ethan watched Amara laughing with the children, showing them how to kick. Her laughter was unburdened, bright. The sight filled him with rare peace, and he realized. He didn't just want Amara in Lila's life, he wanted her in his own. That night, as he drove Amara home, he said quietly, Tomorrow there's an education fundraising gala. Please come with me. Not as a debut, but because that was where Grace met you first. I want you to know you belong there, at least in my eyes. Amara hesitated. Memories surfaced. Lavish parties with Marcus, where she had been treated like an accessory, judged by every glance. She shuddered, but seeing the sincerity in Ethan's eyes, She nodded. All right, but promise you won't leave me stranded in that crowd. The gala glittered with chandeliers and polite laughter. Ethan wore a tuxedo. Amara, a simple dark blue dress that glowed against her warm brown skin. The moment they entered, eyes turned curious, surprised, some skeptical. Ethan squeezed her hand. Ignore them. I only see you. For hours, Amara forced calm. She spoke with a few parents, accepting polite compliments laced with hesitation. Some were kind, others less so. When a woman smirked, "Mr. Caldwell sure knows how to support education in many ways." Amara heard the sting beneath the words. Ethan caught it too. His reply was smooth but sharp. I support education because it's the foundation of society, and I'm lucky enough to be here with someone changing children's futures daily. The woman fell silent. Amara, meanwhile, was stunned. Never before had someone defended her so openly, least of all in a room full of power. Near the end of the gala, Ethan led her onto the balcony. Chicago glittered beneath, the night air cool. He turned, his gaze steady. I know this isn't easy, but I want you here, with me. Not as someone on my arm, but as the person I want to share this life with. Amara stayed quiet for a long time. Joy mixed with unease inside her. She wanted to believe him, yet the memory of all those scrutinizing eyes pierced like needles. Could love really withstand a world watching with prejudice? Ethan didn't press. He held her hand, letting the city lights witness an unspoken vow. Days after the gala, Chicago buzzed with merger headlines. However, photos of Ethan with a public school teacher also spread on social media. Some praised him as different from other tycoons. Others whispered that Amara must be the luckiest woman of the century. At Maplewood, the children were curious. Miss Amara, are you really the girlfriend of the city's biggest boss? She smiled vaguely, but inside she was uneasy. She had never wanted her private life to be gossip. When she told Tasha, her friend only laughed. You should be proud. You didn't just change his life, you made kids believe a teacher can be a superhero. Amara laughed too, but her heart knew the truth was far more complicated. One evening, Ethan invited her and Lila to dinner at Lakeview Towers. Lila proudly held up a drawing, the three of them in a park, with the words scrawled across the top, "My almost mama." Amara froze, trembling as she held the paper. Almost mama? Lila grinned, throwing her arms around her. I don't want to replace Mommy, but I want another mom too. If you say yes, you'll be my almost mama. Amara's chest tightened. She glanced at Ethan, seeing both hope and fear in his eyes. She knelt, hugging Lila tightly. I promise I'll always be here with you, Lila. The moment filled Ethan with certainty that he was on the right path. But that certainty was soon tested. A week later, he brought Amara to a business dinner. Amara tried to stay composed, surrounded by executives, but the judging glances weighed heavily. A blonde woman leaned toward her companion, loud enough for Amara to hear, "She's here for the money. Give it 6 months, he'll realize." Amara flushed, pretending not to hear, but the words cut deep. They brought back Marcus, the parties where she had been belittled, the same suffocating shame. On the way home, Ethan noticed her silence. He squeezed her hand. You okay? She forced a smile. Fine, just tired. But inside, a shadow had grown. A few days later, another blow landed. At Maplewood's parent meeting, a father spoke bluntly, "Miss Amara, we expect you not to bring your personal drama into class. Kids imitate easily. We don't want them thinking marrying rich is the shortcut to success." Amara froze, words dying in her throat. That night, she sat by the window, staring at the city lights, wondering if her love brought happiness or only more prejudice. Would the whispers ever stop? Ethan, though busy, sensed the distance creeping into her eyes. One night, he came to her door with a bouquet of bright sunflowers. "I know you're scared," he said firmly, "but I also know you're stronger than their words. We don't need the world to understand. We only need Lila to understand and you to believe." Amara stared at him, voice trembling. "I want to believe. But what if one day their words start to poison you too? What if you look at me and think I'm not enough?" Ethan stepped forward, wrapping her in his arms. "Grace once wrote that love doesn't make us weaker, it makes us stronger. I believe that, and I won't let anyone define your worth but you." In his embrace, Amara wept. The fear didn't vanish, but softened. Time passed. Their love grew, yet the cloud of prejudice lingered. They had afternoons of joy at the park with Lila and simple dinners in Amara's small apartment, and they stared at school, whip and whispered events. Fragile happiness, Amara thought one night as she graded papers under her desk lamp, Grace's journal resting nearby. She knew this love was worth fighting for, but also that it demanded more courage than anything she had ever faced. On Monday morning, Ethan had barely stepped into Caldwell Tech's headquarters when his phone lit up non-stop. His assistant, Melissa, rushed toward him, pale-faced. "Mr. Caldwell, the police are in the lobby. They say our company is being investigated for stealing data from Harrison Tech." Ethan froze. What? Within an hour, the news had exploded across financial networks. Headlines screamed, "Caldwell Tech, accused of theft merger in jeopardy." Stocks plummeted, and office phones rang endlessly. Lawyers outlined a defense strategy in the boardroom, but Ethan's head spun. His mind wasn't only on the company, it was on Lila. Would her classmates mention it to her? And Amara, would the chaos of his world consume her too? At Maplewood, Amara was tidying up after class when a familiar voice cut through the quiet. "Hello, Amara." She turned, heart sinking. Marcus Barnett, her ex-husband, stood at the door. Same polished smile, tailored suit, expensive cologne. But to Amara, he was only a reminder of suffocating memories. "What are you doing here?" she asked coldly. "Just wanted to see you. Word is, you're dating Ethan Caldwell, millionaire CEO. Impressive. You always did know how to land on your feet." His voice dripped with sweetness edged in mockery. "Leave, Marcus. This is a school." He stepped closer, lowering his tone. "Does he know you once begged me not to leave? That you cried because you thought you weren't enough? You think Caldwell will see you any differently when the city starts talking? Trust me, men like him only stay while it's exciting. Then he'll leave you just like I did." Each word sliced into old wounds. Amara's body trembled, but she pointed to the door. "Get out. Now." Marcus smirked, dropping a business card on her desk. "When you wake up, you'll know who to call." He walked out, leaving her shaken, drowning in doubt. That night, Ethan came late, drained from battling corporate fires. His suit was wrinkled, his tie loose. Amara waited in her small apartment. They sat to eat, but the meal quickly turned tense. "I saw Marcus today," she said hoarsely, setting down her bowl. Ethan's eyes flashed with fury. "What did he say?" Amara hesitated. "The things you'd expect. That I'm not enough. That you'll see it one day." "Ethan, I'm terrified. I don't want the day to come when you're buried in work, worn down by the world, and you look at me like Marcus did." Ethan slammed his glass on the table. "Amara, do you really think I'm like him? I showed you Grace's journal. I told you I want you beside me. What more do you need? I need to know you won't let go when things get hard," she cried, tears streaming. "But lately you've been distant, drowning in the company. I feel like an outsider again. I'm afraid all this is just a fragile dream." Ethan stood too, voice raw. "I'm trying to keep an entire company from collapsing, Amara. Thousands of people depend on me. Do you even understand that weight?" The small apartment filled with ragged breaths, tears, and anger. For the first time, their love was tested not by the past but by the brutal present. Amara turned away, whispering, "Maybe we're fooling ourselves. Maybe love isn't enough. The world out there is too big, Ethan, and I don't know if I'm strong enough to stand against it with you." Ethan stood frozen, heart shattering. He longed to hold her, but the space between them had become a chasm. Outside, Chicago glowed cold and bright. Inside, two people stood apart, their love fierce but trembling. That night, Ethan left without another word. He drove aimlessly through the city's neon streets, weighed down by Amara's tears, Marcus's poison, and Harrison Tech's accusations. For the first time, he felt trapped at a crossroads. Love or work, heart or duty. He stopped by Lake Michigan, sitting for hours in the icy wind. He thought of Grace, her gentle smile, the way she'd encouraged him in the company's early days. If she were alive, would she tell him to fight for love or to sacrifice it for survival? Meanwhile, Amara lay awake, her apartment no longer the refuge it had been. Marcus's words echoed, "Men like him never stay." She hated herself for letting the past poison the present, but the fear wouldn't leave. Would Ethan tire of her? Would she become a burden? She had already lost too much. Could she bear another collapse? Her phone buzzed. A message from Tasha. "Heard about Ethan's company. Are you okay? Don't let other people's voices make you doubt yourself." Amara typed a reply and then erased it. She didn't know if she was okay. 2 days later, the scandal exploded. Leaked documents accused Caldwell Tech of stealing software ideas from Harrison Tech. News anchors hammered Ethan on television. His private life wasn't spared. Amara was labeled the mysterious woman tied to a disgraced CEO. At Maplewood, parents whispered in hallways. One mother muttered loudly, "I don't want my child in a class with a teacher tied to a scandal. It's embarrassing." Amara heard every word. At home, Lila tugged Ethan's sleeve. "Daddy, kids at school asked if you're a criminal. I told them no, but I'm scared." Ethan hugged her, his vision blurring. The storm wasn't only threatening his company, it was bruising the two people he loved most. That night, Ethan went to Amara's apartment again. No flowers, no gifts, just Grace's journal in his hand. She opened the door, her face pale from sleepless nights. "Ethan, I don't know if we can." He cut her off, voice rough. "Amara, I'm not here to argue. I beg one thing. Don't let fear or gossip define us." He placed the journal on the table. "Grace believed in you, before I ever did. She wrote that you had a big heart to love Lila and me. I won't let Marcus, Harrison Tech, or anyone else destroy that. But I need you beside me, not walking away." Tears spilled from Amara's eyes. "I want to believe you, Ethan, but I'm so scared. I don't want Lila to be hurt anymore." Ethan stepped closer, taking her trembling hands. His voice broke. "If you leave me now, that's the deepest wound for Lila. She already sees you as family. So do I." Silence stretched. The ticking clock filled the room. At last, Amara gripped his hand tightly, whispering, "I'll stay. But Ethan, you must promise. No matter what happens to the company, no matter what people say, you won't make me an outsider again." He nodded, pulling her into his arms. They both shook, knowing the storm was far from over, and they had chosen to face it together. Outside, Chicago roared with scandal. But in the small apartment, between two battered hearts, a fragile promise flickered like a candle fighting against the wind. Thursday morning, Caldwell Tech's tower was surrounded by a wall of reporters. Microphones and cameras thrust forward, voices sharp as arrows. "Mr. Caldwell, did your company steal technology from Harrison Tech? What do you say about your relationship with public school teacher Amara Johnson? Will this scandal kill the merger deal?" Ethan kept his face calm, answering only, "We are cooperating with investigators. The truth will come out." But once the glass doors closed behind him, his chest tightened. The weight felt like stone. At Maplewood, Amara faced her own storm. A group of parents petitioned the board, demanding a review of her professional ethics, claiming her connection to Ethan might damage the school's image. Principal Martinez, his hair graying and eyes sympathetic, called her into his office. "Amara, you're a gifted teacher. The children love you, but you see the situation. Parents are afraid of press attention, afraid their kids will get dragged into this. The board is considering a temporary suspension until things settle." Amara went still. "But my students, they're in the middle of projects. I can't just leave them." "I know." His voice was heavy. "Sometimes decisions aren't about fairness, but pressure." Walking out, Amara's heart weighed like lead. It felt like the world was tearing her away from everything she loved. That night, Ethan found her sitting silently at her table. He laid a hand on her shoulder. "They suspended me," she whispered, voice breaking. "Just because I love you." Ethan's chest clenched. He wrapped his arms around her from behind. "I'm sorry. I should have protected you better." "No, Ethan." She turned, tears spilling. "You're not the cause. The cause is this society. They can't believe a teacher belongs beside a CEO without some hidden motive." They don't believe love can bridge that gap. I knew it'd be hard, but I didn't expect it to hurt this much. He held her gaze. Amara, I don't want you to face this alone. Let me do something. I'll go public, stand up for you in front of everyone. She shook her head. Publicity just makes them pry deeper. I don't need big declarations. I must know that you won't pull away when everything shakes around us. Ethan gripped her hand. I promise. The next morning, driving Lila to Riverside, she piped up from the back seat. Daddy, why are people saying mean things about Miss Amara? She's nice. I don't get it. Ethan swallowed hard, pulling over. He turned to his daughter. Some people don't understand love, Lila. They're afraid of what's different. But what matters is that we know the truth. Do you believe in Miss Amara? I do. Lila nodded firmly. I'll tell everyone she's the best teacher ever. Ethan chuckled, eyes wet. His 8-year-old had more courage than most adults. That afternoon, Ethan sat with his lawyers. Fresh evidence suggested the allegations were fabricated by Harrison Tech, with Marcus as their inside accomplice. Leaked emails and recordings hinted at the scheme. Ethan's fist clenched. If they thought they could destroy me by smearing Amara, they'll pay. The lawyer warned, be ready. They'll dig deeper. They won't stop here. Ethan knew. And he also knew the real battle wasn't just in boardrooms or courtrooms, it was in keeping Amara's trust alive. Amara drifted through days of waiting and dread. No longer teaching, she filled mornings with lesson planning, books, and anything to keep her mind occupied. But the news was inescapable. On TV, her name was dragged in as the scandalous woman beside the CEO. One afternoon, a text came from an unknown number. Do you think Caldwell will still choose you once his empire is on fire? Wake up. Her blood ran cold. Even knowing it was harassment, the venom stung. When Ethan came by, she showed him the message. His eyes burned. They don't just want the company. They want us. Amara laid a trembling hand on his arm. If that's true, maybe they've already half succeeded. I keep doubting not you, but myself, wondering if I'm strong enough to stay. Ethan sat across from her, steady. Amara, I've fought wars in business, but I've never been so afraid of losing you. If you doubt, then doubt the world out there. Don't doubt us. Her tears spilled. She knew he meant it, yet the scars of her past marriage still whispered fear. That weekend, Ethan took Amara and Lila to Lake Michigan's shore. No cameras, no gala lights, just wind and waves. He spread a blanket and unpacked takeout boxes. We need a place to breathe, he said softly. A place with no eyes on us, just us three. Lila darted around happily, collecting stones. Amara sat beside Ethan, quiet. He pulled out Grace's journal. She once wrote, "Every love story needs twice the faith, because the world will always doubt." Grace knew what we'd face, but she also believed if love is strong enough, it will stand. Amara laid her hand on the worn cover, whispered, "I want to believe, but I need more than words, Ethan. I need you beside me in action." "You'll have both," he said firmly. On Monday, Ethan shocked the press by calling a conference. In front of dozens of cameras, he released evidence proving Harrison Tech's fraud, with Marcus as the middleman emails, recordings laid bare. The room erupted. A reporter shouted, "Mr. Caldwell, is your relationship with Amara Johnson why she's been targeted?" Ethan didn't flinch. He looked straight into the camera. "Yes, they went after her because she's my vulnerability. But let me be clear, loving Amara is not a weakness. It's the strength that keeps me standing in this fight. They're wrong if anyone thinks they can make me abandon her." The words blazed across evening broadcasts. Some mocked him, but many were unexpectedly moved. Online comments shifted. At least he defends her openly. Let the teacher be. She clearly loves her kids. In her apartment, watching on her small TV, Amara wept. This wasn't a whisper in private, it was a declaration before the world. Ethan had chosen her, despite the risk. That night, when he knocked on her door, she didn't speak. She only rushed into his arms, tears soaking his suit. "I believe now," she whispered. "I won't doubt anymore." Ethan's eyes shone. "Thank you. We'll face this together, Amara. Nothing will break us apart again." Outside, Chicago roared with noise. But in the small apartment, Faith was reborn, fragile still, yet stronger than ever. The morning after the explosive press conference, the headlines flared across every front page. Caldwell strikes back. Evidence against Harrison Tech. Marcus Barnett implicated in trade scandal. Love between CEO and teacher. Weakness or strength. When Ethan returned to Caldwell Tech, his phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Shareholders demanded to know if the merger still stood a chance. Reporters swarmed the lobby. But this time, he didn't feel alone. Amara had texted him, "Lila and I believe in you. Don't let them make you forget that." He read those words repeatedly, lifted his head high, and walked into the boardroom. At Maplewood, Amara opened her inbox expecting more criticism. Instead, she found letters of support. One mother wrote, "My daughter came home saying Miss Johnson taught her that no one else can decide her worth. I want you to know, we stand with you." Tears slipped down Amara's face. After days of suffocation, she could finally breathe. Tasha dropped by later, grinning. "See, not everyone believes the noise. The media screams loud, but the truth always finds its way." Amara smiled faintly, though anxiety lingered. She knew the storm wasn't over. Friday evening, Ethan took Amara and Lila to their favorite diner in the neighborhood. The moment they walked in, heads turned. A young couple whispered, "That's them. Looks just like on TV." A group of college kids tried snapping photos discreetly. Amara stiffened. Ethan squeezed her hand. "Ignore it. Focus on us." Over dinner, Lila chatted about school while Ethan and Amara listened, laughing. Despite the stares, they were simply a family sharing a meal for a brief while. Amara realized what she truly wanted wasn't to hide from gossip, but to protect these small, ordinary joys. A week later, the police released official findings. Harrison Tech and Marcus had conspired to fabricate evidence. Newspapers flipped their tone overnight, praising Ethan as steadfast in defending the truth and a man unafraid to defend the woman he loves. A local TV station even aired a feature on Amara, interviewing colleagues and former students. Children beamed into the camera, "Miss Johnson is the best teacher. She believes in us even when we don't." Amara wept in front of her screen. That same night, Principal Martinez called. "Amara," the board reconsidered. "Parents have written to apologize. You can return to your class next week. We're glad to have you back." She collapsed into her chair, laughing through tears. Teaching wasn't just a job, it was part of her soul, returned at last. When Ethan arrived later, she fell into his arms. "I was so afraid I'd lose everything. But the only thing I needed to hold on to was faith in you and myself." He pressed his forehead to hers. "And now that the storm has passed, we can start thinking about tomorrow. A real future, Amara." In the glow of warm light, she felt the ground solid under her feet. This wasn't fragile infatuation anymore. It was love, tested and proven. But the media never lets a story end quietly. With the Harrison scandal cooling, they turned their spotlight squarely onto Ethan and Amara's romance. Billionaire CEO and public school teacher, a modern fairy tale. The woman who changed Ethan Caldwell. Some articles gushed, others sneered. Online comments sliced deep. Fairy tale, more like a free PR stunt. Give it 6 months, he'll get bored. Amara read them, her chest tightening. No matter how often Ethan told her to tune it out, the venom lodged like thorns. Could their love stand when so many still doubted? Ethan invited her to join him for a live TV interview one evening. The network wanted his take on Harrison Tech, but he'd agreed on one condition. Amara would be there too. He wanted people to see her as more than whispers and speculation. Under the studio lights, Amara's hands trembled. Ethan leaned close, whispering, "Just be yourself." The host asked, "Miss Johnson, what's it like to be thrust into public scrutiny just because of a relationship?" Amara drew a breath. "It's been hard. I lost my job temporarily. I heard people doubt my worth. But I've also received support from my students, from parents who know me, and from Ethan. I want to be seen as a teacher, as a person, not just as someone's shadow." Ethan added steadily, "And I want to make it clear, Amara is no shadow. She's the one who brought laughter back to my daughter. She reminds me that success isn't numbers, it's love and kindness. If anyone thinks our love is a stunt, look at the children whose lives she's touched." The studio fell silent. When the broadcast ended, social media erupted not with mockery, but with unexpected warmth. "That teacher is real. If this is acting, they deserve Oscars." Watching the replay later, Amara felt something unclench in her chest. Truth doesn't always need to shout. Sometimes it only needs to be lived. Back at Maplewood, her return was met with open arms. Children swarmed her, hugging, shouting. "My mom saw you on TV. She said she's proud. I have you as my teacher." A boy beamed. Amara burst into tears right in the classroom. For the first time in months, she felt wholly in place again. That evening, curled on Ethan's couch, Lila nestled between them, softly humming, head resting against Amara's shoulder. Ethan gazed at the scene, emotions surging. He thought of Grace, of the storms they had survived, and realized he had arrived at a place he once thought impossible, where truth and love could coexist, fragile, yet unbreakable. He turned to Amara, voice low. "We've survived the storm. Now, are you ready to think bigger?" Her brown eyes shimmered. "What do you mean?" He smiled, taking her hand. "I mean the future, a real home. Not just for me and Lila, for all three of us." And in that look, Amara saw it was no fleeting promise, but something lasting. For the first time, she wasn't afraid. Spring came late in Chicago, but this year, Amara felt the air warmer than ever. In recent weeks, she, Ethan, and Lila spent many afternoons at the park, sitting under fresh green trees, eating ice cream, watching children run and laugh. For Amara, those simple joys proved that love could endure after every storm. One evening, Ethan invited Amara and Lila to dinner at Lakeview Towers. The moment she stepped inside, Amara froze. The living room glowed with candlelight, the dining table carefully set with fresh flowers. Alongside the two familiar silverware sets was a smaller one just for Lila. "What's going on?" Amara asked with a soft laugh, but her heart pounded. Ethan stood, eyes glimmering. "Amara, we've been through more trials than any love story I've ever heard. But every time I thought I was about to lose you, I realized I can't, and neither can Lila." He motioned to his daughter. Lila hopped down from her chair, carrying a small red velvet box. "Almost Mama, this is for you." Amara's hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a classic diamond ring, sparkling under the light. Ethan knelt. His voice was husky with emotion. "Amara Johnson, you've given me and my daughter a home I thought I'd never find again. I can't promise it will always be easy, but I will never let go. Will you become family with us?" Tears streamed down Amara's cheeks. In that moment, all the whispers, all the fears melted away. She looked at Lila, the child's green eyes bright with hope, and nodded. "Yes, I want to." The apartment rang with Lila's joyful cheer. Ethan rose, pulled Amara into his arms, and kissed her not with the trembling of first beginnings, but with the certainty of two hearts that had survived the storm to find each other. News of their engagement spread quickly, but this time, the media did not sneer. Newspapers showed a simple picture, a CEO holding a public school teacher in his arms, with a little girl laughing brightly beside them. One article read, "This may not be a fairy tale, but proof that love can overcome prejudice when it is genuine enough." Amara read it with a calm heart. She didn't need the world's recognition, but she knew their story had planted hope for those afraid to love across divides. They began preparing for a true home. Ethan suggested selling his high-rise apartment and buying a house in the suburbs with a small garden where Lila could grow flowers and Amara could read on the porch. "I want a place for us to start again, not a castle in the sky, but a real home." Amara nodded, tears glistening. She knew he was shedding part of his cold, glittering world to build a space they could honestly share. One Sunday morning, the three of them painted Lila's new bedroom. Ethan's shirt was streaked with paint. Lila giggled uncontrollably, and Amara thought, true happiness is not avoiding storms, but daring to build a nest right in the middle of one. "Our family is the best," Lila shouted. At that moment, Amara knew. She was no longer the outsider in Ethan and Grace's story. She had become part of a new journey where the past was honored, but the future belonged to them. Their wedding wasn't held in a grand church or luxury hotel, but in the backyard of their suburban home. Wildflowers covered the grass, wooden chairs formed a circle, and children ran freely. Amara wore a simple white dress, curls falling gently. Ethan stood in a grey suit, but his eyes caught every gaze. The eyes of a man who had once lost everything, now having found it again. Lila, in a pink dress, proudly carried the rings. When the minister asked, "Who gives this ring to the bride?" she held up the box and declared, "Almost Mama, now you're my real Mama." Laughter rippled through the crowd, and many eyes brimmed with tears. Amara whispered her vow. "I promise not to run anymore. I promise to stand with you to protect this family no matter what the world outside says." His voice breaking, Ethan replied, "I promise never to make you feel you're not enough. You are what Grace hoped for us, and you are my choice today, tomorrow, forever." They kissed amid cheers, surrounded by friends and Amara's students. It wasn't a fairy tale, it was real. Real, built with struggle, faith, and love. Years later, life wasn't always easy. Ethan still had long workdays. Amara still overheard whispers now and then, but their suburban house rang with laughter, simple dinners, weekends at the farmer's market, evenings curled up with books. Lila grew up telling friends she had two mothers, one in heaven, one on earth, and both loved her completely. Hearing that, Amara's heart ached and overflowed with joy at once. Ethan often said, "We don't replace anyone. We only continue, so that love never ends." And Amara believed him. One autumn night, after Lila had fallen asleep, Amara wrote in her journal, "3 years ago, I thought I didn't deserve a family. I thought class divides and prejudice would crush any hope. But I've learned love isn't a miracle, it's a choice we make every day. To stay, to trust. And that choice turns fragility into strength." She closed the journal, glanced at Ethan reading by the window. He looked up and smiled, a peaceful smile, no longer shadowed. Amara walked over and rested her head on his shoulder. Outside, Chicago was still noisy, still full of judgment, but inside their tiny home, they had built another world, one where love was measured not by wealth or status, but by the way two people held on to each other when storms came. And that was their new family, imperfect, but real.